Welcome to Middle Math Academy Ratio Tables Level Number 1. Our learning targets, or what we're going to focus on today, is finding the missing value in a ratio table, writing equivalent ratios in a ratio table, and writing number sentences to help identify patterns in a ratio table. I want you to rate yourself before the lesson. Circle 1 if you've never practiced any of these skills before. 3 is you're a little bit familiar with these skills. And then 5 is you feel like an expert in these skills already. Our opening problem says, a smoothie recipe calls for 2 cups of orange juice and 3 cups of blueberries. Sketch a picture to represent the ingredients in your smoothie. Pause the video and take a minute to sketch a picture any way that makes sense to you to represent 2 cups of orange juice and 3 cups of blueberries. Once you drew your picture, come back to the video. There's not one right answer for this problem. Maybe you drew 2 cups of orange juice and 3 cups of blueberries. Maybe you literally wrote the letter O twice and the letter B 3 times. If you're familiar with tape diagrams, maybe you wrote O and drew 2 boxes and then drew 3 boxes for blueberries. Or if you're familiar with double number lines, maybe you wrote O and the number 2 next to it, and then B for blueberries and the number 3 next to it. There's not one right answer. Let's take a look at problem B. Your friend comes over and also wants a smoothie. Draw a picture to represent the ingredients needed for 2 smoothies. How many cups of orange juice will you need? How many cups of blueberries will you need? Pause the video. Draw a picture any way you want showing 2 servings of this smoothie. Up here we have 1. I want you to draw a picture showing 2 servings. And then write, how many cups of orange juice will you need? And how many cups of blueberries will you need? We know our original recipe required 2 cups of orange juice and 3 cups of blueberries. So if we want to double that recipe or make enough for 2 people, that means I need to add another 2 cups of orange juice and another 3 cups of blueberries. So for 2 people, our smoothie recipe will require 4 cups of orange juice and 6 cups of blueberries. Remember, you can always pause the video if you need more time. Let's take a look at problem C. Your friend loved the smoothie you made. In fact, she thinks you should make a smoothie for the entire 6th grade. If there are 300 students in the 6th grade, why might drawing a picture to determine ingredients be challenging? Pause the video and answer this question. Well, if we need to make 300 smoothies, repeating this process 300 times would be too time-consuming. Let's take a look at the next question. What predictions do you have on how to determine the number of orange juice needed and number of blueberries needed? Pause the video and answer this question. I'm not going to go over this problem, but make sure to fill it in. Let's take a look at our notes. Instead of drawing a picture to represent our ingredients, because remember, that would be too time-consuming, we can organize and represent our data in a ratio table. A ratio table helps us visualize the relationship between 2 quantities. The 2 quantities are the 2 things you're comparing. In our example, the 2 things we're comparing are orange juice and blueberries. And whatever you're comparing will always go in the header of your ratio table. We need to label what numbers represent. So let's take a minute and let's write orange juice at the top of this, on the top of the left side of our ratio table, and blueberries on the right side of our ratio table. Now, the original ratio we were given was 2 cups of orange juice for every 3 cups of blueberries. So we can start there. Now, in problem B, we doubled our smoothie recipe. We multiplied 2 by 2 and 3 by 2. When our friend wanted a smoothie too, we needed 4 cups of orange juice and 6 cups of blueberries. Now I want you to think to yourself, what if we had a third friend come over? Fill in how many cups of orange juice would we need and how many cups of blueberries. One way to think about this is I can go back to my original recipe and multiply my orange juice times 3 and my blueberries times 3. Whatever you multiply one side of your ratio table by, you have to multiply the other side by as well. 2 times 3 is 6. 3 times 3 is 9. Now, before we fill in the rest of our ratio table, let's go back to our notes real quick. An important key point about ratio tables is that the order is not important. So, for example, for orange juice, we have 2, 4, 6. Technically, we could have 8 here, and then 3, 6, 9. We could have 12 here. But ratio tables won't always work like that. So, an example is, if I have 200 cups of orange juice, and yes, please write this down with me, I want you to predict how many cups of blueberries do you think I would need? Well, I know that 2 times 100 is 200. And so whatever I do to one side of the ratio table, I have to do to the other. So since I multiplied by 100 here, I'm going to multiply by 100 here. And 3 times 100 is 300. Now, let's say I had 30 blueberries. Pause the video and fill in how many cups of orange juice do you think that would be? Well, I'm going to go back to my original ratio, and I know that 3 times 10 is 30. So I'll multiply by 10 on this side, and 2 times 10 is 20. So once again, the key point being the order doesn't matter. Our next note, note number 3, ratio tables represent equivalent ratios. If you notice, we almost have that word equal and equivalent. And the reason why is equivalent ratios are ratios that have the same value. And what we mean by that is they can be written in different ways, but they will always have the same meaning. For example, our first smoothie that was just for us, 2 glasses of orange juice, 2 cups of orange juice, 3 cups of blueberries. That smoothie would taste the same even when we doubled it because it has the same value. So our last note says blank and blank are equivalent ratios. Well, just like I mentioned, 2 to 3 is equivalent. Remember, it would taste the same as 4 cups of orange juice to 6 cups of blueberries. They represent a relationship where there are 2 parts of the first quantity for every 3 parts of the second quantity. Now, a couple examples to find the value of the ratio is I can take my blueberries, 3, and divide it. Remember that fraction line means divide. And 3 divided by 2 is 1.5. every time I divide my blueberries by my orange juice, I'll get 1.5 as an answer. Let me make that a little bit easier to read, hopefully. All right, let's do another one. Let's say I choose 9 blueberries and 6 cups of orange juice. I'll still get 1.5. I want you to fill in this, choose 2 more values for blueberries and orange juice, write what you get when you divide them, and then flip to page 2. Page number 2 says, use the ratio description to fill in each ratio table. Write a multiplication number sentence to show the relationship between quantities. Okay, so in problem A, here's our ratio description, and a key word for ratio descriptions are for every. They represent ratios. So it looks like for every 2 dogs, there are 8 cats. So every time our dogs increase by 2, our cats will increase by 8. So I'm going to go ahead and fill in 2 and 8. I want you to pause, fill in the rest of this table, and then come back to the video. So remember, ratio tables don't have to go in order. Some ways you could have filled this in is like this. You could have had 2 to 8, 4 to 16, 6 to 24. You could have also continued down and had 8, 10 on the dog side and 32, 40 on the cat side. Or we could take dogs, multiply 2 times 10 and get 20, and 8 times 10 and get 80. Remember, whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other side. We can also multiply 8 times 100 and 2 times 100 and get 200 on this side and 800 for our cats. Now let's write our multiplication number sentence. I'm going to ask myself, what do I need to multiply my dogs by to get my cats? Well, if I think of it as 2 times blank equals 8, I know 2 times 4 equals 8, but it's always a good best practice to make sure that works for every row. Is 4 times 4 16? 6 times 4 24? Yep. 20 times 4 is 80, and 200 times 4 is 800. So an example of a multiplication number sentence is, we could say, dogs. Remember, whatever I write, you should write, times 4, because we can multiply any of our numbers for our dogs times 4 will equal our cats. And you can stop there, or you can add an extra example. So you can take any of the rows. Maybe I'll take the second row, 4. 4 dogs times 4 equals 16 cats. And so the value of our ratio is 4. Now, the value of our ratio is also 4 because I could take our cats. 8 divided by 2 is 4. 16 divided by 4 is 4. So multiplication and division are inverses. If I multiply my dogs times 4 to get my cats, I can take my cats and divide by 4 to get my dogs. Now in level 1, we're just going to work on multiplication number sentences today, but if you are doing level 2, we'll throw in division number sentences as well. Complete the rest of page 2 and then come back to the video. All right, page 3 says, fill in the missing value in each ratio table. Write a multiplication number sentence to show the relationship between quantities. So A says the table below shows a relationship between the number of chocolate chips and the number of brownies. So I notice that I have more chocolate chips than I have brownies. So I'm going to ask myself, 3 times what is 12? Well, I know 3 times 4 is 12. Let's see if that pattern continues in our ratio table. Is 6 times 4 24? Yep. So I'm going to continue that pattern down. 9 times 4. I'll write my answer here. 12 times 4 is 48. And then we can write what 15 times 4 is here. So 9 times 4 is 36. And 15 times 4 is 60. Now, a couple ways to figure out the value of the ratio table. You could just look at what we're multiplying our brownies by, or you could take one of our chocolate chip values, like 24, right here, and divide it by the brownie value, 6. 24 divided by 6 is 4. And that works for any value because these are equivalent ratios. So my multiplication number sentence could be something like brownies times 4 equals chocolate chips. That's the value of our ratio. And then you could provide an example, something like 6 brownies, right, which is right here, times 4 equals 24 chocolate chips. Pause the video, complete the rest of page 3, and then come back. On page 4, it says, fill in the missing value in each ratio table. Write a multiplication number sentence to show the relationship between quantities. We're going to do B as an example, and then you'll work on A and C on your own. B says the ratio of cups of water to cups of flour is 4 to 20. Okay, so I'm going to try to figure out what is the value of my ratio. Let's start there this time. So what I can do is I can take the value for flours, 20, and divide it by what we have for water, 4, and I get 5. Now, whenever you get your answer, you want to make sure that it works in your ratio table and that pattern is accurate. So let's check. I'm going to ask myself, can I multiply 4 times 5 and get 20? Yep. What about 8 times 5? Is that 40? Yep. So I'm going to continue that pattern down. I'll multiply 12 times 5, 16 times 5, and so on. And I'll let you fill in this section on your own. Pause the video and fill in the rest of the table in B and write your multiplication number sentence. So what you should have for B, 12 times 5 is 60. Put a check if you got that right. 16 times 5 is 80. 20 times 5 is 100. And 24 times 5 is 120. If you didn't get those right, fix your mistakes. No worries. And then our multiplication number sentence, whatever our water is, we can always multiply that by 5 to get our cups of flour. And you could use any of these examples. You could say 8 cups of water times 5 equals 40 cups of flour. And once again, you can use any of the examples from the table. All right, make sure you have this down, complete the rest of page 4, and then come back to the video. Page 5 says, use a ratio description to fill in each ratio table. Make sure to label your ratio table. Write a multiplication number sentence to show the relationship between quantities. So, A says the ratio of tomato plants to cucumber plants is 3 to 6. So I noticed that tomato plants came first and 3 came first. So I know that 3 belongs to the tomato plants. Cucumber plants came second and 6 came second. So I know that the 6 belongs with cucumber plants. Remember, the order matters with ratios and ratio sentences. So let's go ahead and label our table. We're going to label tomato plants and cucumber plants. Remember, you can always pause the video if you need more time. So now what we're going to do is we're going to write equivalent ratios. And so you could keep increasing your tomato plants by 3, like add another 3 and we get 6. Then add another 6 and we get 12. Or you could multiply by any number. So for example, I could do 3 times 5 and 6 times 5. As long as you multiply each ratio by the same number, they'll be equivalent. 3 times 5 is 15. 6 times 5 is 30. Go ahead and fill in the rest of this ratio table on your own, then come back to the video. So for our multiplication number sentence, I notice that I'm always going to multiply my tomato plants times 2 to get my cucumber plants. 3 times 2 is 6. 6 times 2 is 12. 15 times 2 is 30. And if you notice one of those is off ever, just make sure to go back and check your work. That's a good way to check yourself to make sure your answer is reasonable. Now, our multiplication number sentence. I can take my tomato plants and multiply them times 2 to get my cucumber plants. I'll let you come up with your own example if you want, and write the value of the ratio on your own. Complete the rest of page 5, then come back to the video. Page 6 says, Kayla made a table that shows a relationship between the number of apples and the number of bananas in each batch of smoothie. Kayla made an error in one row. What row has the error? So here are our row numbers. I'm just going to highlight them in marker because I think sometimes these numbers confuse students a little bit, but we're really just labeling the rows so we can figure out where the error is or the mistake. So I want you to look at the relationship between bananas and oranges and figure out which one is not correct, and then come back to the video. So when I look at this relationship, I know that 2 times 5 is 10, 4 times 5 is 20, 6 times 5 is 30, 8 times 5 is not 50. Okay, so that tells me that this answer right here is not correct. But I'm going to keep going just to make sure. Is 20 times 5 100? Yes, it is. So all the other rows were correct except row 4. So what row has an error? Row 4. B says, what should the correct number of oranges be in the row that has the error? Well, if we did multiply 8 times 5, that would give us 40. So 40 should be the correct answer for row 4's oranges. All right, our closing problem says, write a ratio description, fill in the table below using your ratio description, and write a number sentence to represent the equivalent ratios in your table. And so I gave you a little hint to get you started. Up here, we could say, in this example, for every 10 oranges, there are 2 bananas. You're coming up with your own. So you can start with for every, figure out what 2 quantities you want to talk about. Maybe it's pencils to paper, soccer balls to baseballs, whatever it is, write it. Then you're going to label your headers in your table and fill in the table. Then you'll write your multiplication number sentence. Once you've done that, come back to the video. All right, last but not least, our debrief problems say, in your own words, what did you learn today? Be really specific here. Sometimes it helps to go back to the other pages and just look at even the directions and see what you practiced. Talk about how much effort you put in, rate yourself 1 through 5. Remember, 1 is the lowest rating, 5 is the highest. And then what do you think is a common mistake students might make? What's something that maybe, you made a mistake on today that you would tell another student to watch out for? Once you've answered these 3 problems, go back to page 1 and rate yourself after the lesson for each learning target. So here's page 1. At the start of the lesson, we rated ourselves 1 through 5, how we felt before we practiced. Now I want you to rate yourself after the lesson. Now that you've gotten some more practice in, how are you feeling? 1 is the lowest, 5 is the highest. If you're interested in more ratio tables practice, this is level 1. We have 5 levels of challenge, with 5 being the highest. Level 2 will incorporate division number sentences. Same thing in level 3. And then in level 4 and 5, we work on ratio tables and graphing. I hope everyone has a wonderful day, and thanks for checking out Middle Math Academy.